Advanced stuff, discovering and using COM objects. Now, the component object model, or COM, is kind of an older Microsoft software development framework. PowerShell is fully capable of using COM objects, subject to some heavy caveats, which we're going to cover. And because it's an older technology, PowerShell isn't necessarily going to do much to make using these things easier on you. You'll see what I mean as we go. Much of the time when you need to use a COM object, it's because you're working with an older technology perhaps, or maybe because you've got an old VB script, and that's what VB script was based on, was COM, and you want to start translating it over to PowerShell. There's really two different tasks involved. One is instantiating the COM object, which means loading it up into memory. That's relatively straightforward once you know the name of the COM object. And then once it's in memory, actually using the thing. And that's definitely straightforward once you know how to use the COM object. Yeah, you'll see what I mean. There's definitely, like I said, there's caveats here. This is an older technology, and it's just not as helpful as some of the newer technologies that PowerShell can work with. Now, I'm going to be working in Windows 8, and I've got PowerShell 3 installed here, but this is the same stuff that's been around since PowerShell version 1. No real changes. Now, the trick to working with COM objects is you have to find out the type ID, the type name of these things. Or actually, the class ID is another way you'll see it referred to. And there's no central list. There's no command in PowerShell that I can run that will show me that. You typically find these things because, well, you're looking at an older VB script, and it used COM objects all the time. And so you've found, for example, the scripting.filesystem object. No tab completion here. Nope, no tab completion. PowerShell is willing to use these, but it doesn't like it. This is a much older technology. You've got to remember that PowerShell is built on the .NET framework. Now, the .NET framework has an interoperability or interop layer that's designed to kind of sort of connect to COM objects and make them look kind of sort of like a .NET object, but it's a little dicey. So anyway, here I'm using the new object command. I'm giving it the -com object parameter so that it knows that this scripting.filesystem string is the name of a COM object. Now, .NET is going to have to go to the registry, look up that class ID, find the associated DLL on disk, load it up into memory, and it's also going to have to ask the registry where the type library is, because the type library actually defines the things that this COM object can do. Not every COM object comes with a type library, and you probably will not be able to use ones that don't, because .NET needs them in order to make it usable. So, I think I meant to put file system object. There we go. So once you get the class ID right, you're good to go. If you don't get the class ID right, you're good to go home and forget about it. And once we've got that, I can pipe it to get member. And because this particular COM object should have a type library, getMember can tell me about its methods and properties. So we've got some methods up top. Looks like we've just got one property, the drives property. That's probably a collection. Yeah, it's a collection of drive objects. So let's see. We do have this one here called get special folder, and it wants as an argument a special folder constant. And I have no idea whatsoever what that might be. So here's how we're going to find out. File system object, get special folder. And again, the downside to using these things is that there's nothing in PowerShell or really anywhere else but the internet where you're going to find what it means. So let's see if we can get some Bing goodness going on here. All right, I love it when we get a hit on MSDN because that's Microsoft's site, and that means we're probably actually going to get some documentation. But you see all these hits are VB script and active server pages, which was VB script. Okay, and once we get the results, here we go. So 0 gets me the path to the Windows folder, 1 to the system, 2 for temp. Let's leave that up for a second. So let's see if I can do this. It would be fs, which is the variable I stored the object in. It will tab complete that. Get special folder 0. Okay, so that's actually returning an object. So we could just say get special folder path. Yep. All right, and let's do it with 1, which is system. Yep. And 2 was temp. Yep, so that's my temp folder. So that's how you use these things. There's just not much more to it than that. Now let's look at using a collection, because we had this drives collection. Okay, so that spit out some objects. It looks like they have a path, available space, free space, total size. Yeah, this looks like stuff I could really get with WMI if I wanted to, but let's play with it. Let's pipe that to select object, because they are objects. They're old objects, but they're still objects. So let's see if I can select off just the path, the drive type, and the total size. Yeah, so I mean, and we could probably format that as a table with auto size. Yeah. So you can kind of sort of ish use these like you would use the rest of the objects in PowerShell. It's just finding them and getting them up and running and finding documentation for them. Expect that to be harder. These things were created in a world where Microsoft didn't really write documentation all the time. Lots of COM objects out there that there just aren't. You know, and here's one. Let's see if this one exists still. All you can do is try it. New object, COM object, AD sysinfo? No. AD system info? Ooh, that does exist. AD get member. And this is get member is how you're going to discover what this thing can do. And you know what this means? You'll notice there's nothing useful here. That means that COM object probably does not have a type library on my system. So Windows PowerShell can't figure out what it does. So let's say I ran across this in some old VB script and I'm trying to figure it out. Let's copy that type name to the clipboard. I'll show you a trick. If you have a type name, include the word VB script in your search. It should help narrow things down. Yeah, and so here's the MSDN docs. Here's a scripting guy. That would probably be useful, but we're going to go the hard way and go for the docs. And let's see if this says what it does. Yeah, see, this is listing methods and properties. Get any DC name. You know what? Let's play with it. AD get, and I can't tab complete. No useful tab completion here because there's no type library. Get any DC name. No, that says it didn't work. That's sad. Get DC site name. AD get DC site name. Nope. And see, this is where interop falls down sometimes. Sometimes it just can't talk to these old things. Let's try a property. AD, what was it? The property name? Oops. What was the property name again? Just computer name. Computer name. Now, yeah, this is one of those objects that's not getting through the interop layer all that well. And this is just kind of what happens, unfortunately. Now, fortunately, there's other ways to get these same pieces of information. For example, the environment variable, computer name, will get me the computer name. So that's why I say a lot of times when I see an older script or a code example that's using one of these COM objects, I'll sit down and try and figure out what it's trying to do and then try and find another way to do the same thing, preferably with a PowerShell command, maybe a .NET Framework class, which we're going to talk about in the next nugget, just because these COM things can get a little bit unreliable. And it's tough finding the documentation and everything for them. So when I can avoid them, I do. So now you know that you can use PowerShell's new object commandlet to instantiate a COM object. If you save that into a variable, you can then use the COM object, and doing so looks a lot like the old VB script code where we had to use COM objects a lot. Now, the downside of COM objects is that they themselves are not very discoverable. There's not really a central list of who they are or what they are and what they can do, and they're not documented anywhere in PowerShell's own help files. So using them is, for me, kind of a last resort. I'm only going to do it if I've found some documentation or maybe if I'm translating it in an old VB script so that I've got something to look at to tell me how the stupid thing is supposed to work in the first place, because they're just tough. Ideally, when I see a COM object being used in a VB script, I try to find out if there's a .NET Framework way or a PowerShell command way of doing that same task so that I don't have to use these mysterious, difficult to figure out COM objects. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.